Admiral Paul Zukunft is wrapping up his time as Commandant of the Coast Guard. And recently at the National Press Club, he gave his final State of the Coast Guard address. In his remarks, he talked about the accomplishments of the service in the face of 3 massive storms and the need for an increased budget for the Coast Guard.
For a service that punches above its weight class, it's high time we were budgeted accordingly, because quite honestly, for many years we have been budgeted in the lowest weight class, the flyweight class, and more recently I directed my senior leaders to abandon the do or die, suicide, squeeze, bunched stance that we have taken when it comes to defending our budget.
After his speech, Admiral Zukunft sat down exclusively with Defense News to discuss his time in office and what's ahead for the Coast Guard.
Admiral, thank you so much for sitting down with us today. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Jill, and thank you for helping us tell our story.
So you are approaching your exit as Commandant of the Coast Guard. Can you first tell me about how that feels? Is it emotional?
I don't think it will be. The first thing you have to do is reconnect with who you are and not what you are. And there's a big difference between the two. When I show up at work, good morning, Admiral, and when I go home, I don't get that. You know, I'm a husband, I'm a father, I'm a grandfather, and that's who I am. And so the first thing I need to do is let go of what I am and reconnect with who I am.
The latest news that I would like to touch on first is the new request for proposals for the icebreaker. Can you tell me a little bit more about it? You gave a few comments. You mentioned that it's very important these are properly weaponized. What might these look like in terms of systems?
Yeah, so we're well on the road to start building these. We stood up an integrated program office with the Navy. The first tranche of funding came through a Department of Defense appropriation and $150 million to get this program off and running. We've got 5 vendors who are interested in building heavy icebreakers here in the United States. We'll award a bid. If it meets our requirements, we'll look at what is most affordable and can it meet schedule as well, so we can get the first icebreaker in the water by 2023.
Which is
23,
amazing.
right.
2023, correct?
Right.
Yeah. You and I have spoken before about how the Coast Guard is perceived and how folks don't always give the Coast Guard the credit, particularly as a military service. Has that improved? How much further do we need to go for the Coast Guard to get that proper perception from the public at large, but also from the military itself?
Yeah, well, I have a great rapport with the chairman, with the Joint Chiefs, other service chiefs. I sit in the tank on all the deliberations, whether it affects operations or whether it affects the force. I have a seat at the table. So really no issues there. I think the other 2 areas of concern is that 96% of my budget is non-defense discretionary funded. Only 4% of my budget is funded through defense discretionary. So if you lift budget caps, who are the other donors then? If you're going to lift a budget cap for defense discretionary spending, well, you're going to go after non-defense discretionary. So we have found ourselves being the donor as an armed service to the other armed services, to the point where our operational expense account since 2013 has been underfunded $150 million. We're about $1 billion underfunded, and we continue to be funded in our annualized operating and maintenance account below the Budget Control Act floor. We're looking at it 18 and 19, finally getting our head above water, but we've been swimming underwater in the BCA Act ever since it's an enactment because of this non-defense discretionary. The public, most coastal communities know who we are. Mm-hmm. As you move into the nation's heartland, you know, there are a number that don't know we're a military service. So there's always an identity crisis of sort. You know, who are those guys anyway?
You were the first among the Joint Chiefs to come out in support of the transgender community. Mm. What, when basically there was questions on whether they should be allowed in the military, what inspired you to do that?
Know your people. You know, 2 weeks before that, actually it was less than that. There was a message that went out, and one member, high performing member of our Coast Guard who is transgender. Family has disowned this individual. This person no longer exists in his family's eyes. This person's family is this family of blue suits, the United States Coast Guard. Families turn their back on this individual, And am I going to do the same thing to this high-performing, who came clean? When a policy is, we embrace you and this lifestyle, you can serve, and in your service of choice, I'm not going to break faith with those individuals. And these are small numbers.
Yeah.
17.
Right. But you know that.
Right.
I bet there's many that don't.
Yeah.
So I give you credit for that. Exiting words as you move on, what do you hope for the Coast Guard in the years ahead that will stay as a priority and perhaps that they might see change in future years?
Yeah, Jill, I think this is my 8th command I've had in the Coast Guard. When I left command of ship, I said, you have the watch, and you walk away. The last ship I commanded, I went back for some event 6 months later, and most of the crew had changed out. And they had asked me if I ever served on a ship of that class. And it was all I could do to say, I was the captain of the ship 6 months ago. So you need to realize that, this is not about you. There are many capable people that will take the service to the next level. I am adamant that anyone in these positions cannot be enamored with a legacy. If you try to leave a legacy, and maybe it's the right thing for the service, but most people will jump off the legacy train as soon as there's a new engineer. And quite honestly, this locomotive is going to run whether I show up for work one day or not to the next. It really is the men and women at the deck plate that run it. But I am very confident that my successor will take this, as every commandant going back to the very first, each one of them has taken the service to another level.
Well, thank you so much for sitting with us. We appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Jill.